Ryukyuan missions to Edo. Over the course of Japan's Edo period, the Ryūkyū Kingdom sent 18 missions to Edo. Ryūkyū Jianghu Shanghai, Ryūkyū Edo nobori, lit. The going up of Ryūkyū to Edo, the capital of Tokugawa, Japan. The unique pattern of these diplomatic exchanges evolved from models established by the Chinese, but without denoting any predetermined relationship to China or to the Chinese world order. The kingdom became a vassal to the Japanese feudal domain Han of Satsuma following Satsuma's 1609 invasion of Ryūkyū, and as such were expected to pay tribute to the shogunate. The missions also served as a great source of prestige for Satsuma, the only Han to claim any foreign polity, let alone a kingdom, as its vassal. Evolving relationships. Royal princes or top-ranking officials in the royal government served as chief envoys and were accompanied by merchants, craftsmen, scholars, and other government officials as they journeyed first by sea to the Ryukyuan in Kagoshima, an institution which served a role similar to a consulate for the Ryūkyū Kingdom, and then on by land to Edo. Missions traveled as a part of Satsuma's regular missions to Edo under the Sankin-Katai system. The Ryukyuan envoys and their entourage considerably outnumbered by the Japanese envoys and entourage from Satsuma, and were housed in the Shimazu clan residences during their time in Edo. Even so, they were still regarded as diplomatic missions from a foreign country. This was reflected in the envoys' reception in Edo, in the associated rituals and meetings. Ryūkyū was, however, regarded as being quite low in the hierarchy of foreign countries in the shogunate's world view. While the Ryukyuan embassies paralleled in many ways those sent by Joseon dynasty Korea in the same period, since envoys from both Korea and Ryūkyū were not equals with the shogun, intermediaries represented the shogunate in meetings with the envoys. While Korean envoys met with members of various high-ranking families, the koke, envoys from Ryūkyū were met by a lower-ranking master of ceremonies, the sashabin. The nature and composition of these Ryukyuan missions to Edo evolved over the course of time. The earliest Ryukyuan mission was received in Kyoto in 1451. Hotoku 3, seventh-month mention of this diplomatic event is among the first of its type to be published in the West in an 1832 French version of Sangoku Tsuren Zyusetsu Sangyuo Tong Lan Tu Shuo, an illustrated description of 3 countries by Hayashi Shihei. The essential character of these diplomatic expeditions mirrored the Ryukyuan embassies to the King Court in Beijing. The best extant description of these embassies is found in Tsuko Akurin, compiled by Hayashi Akira in 1853. Japanese modifications to the well-established concepts and patterns of foreign relations of Imperial China developed as conditions changed. Every mission was conducted either to congratulate a new shogun on his succession or in connection with the accession of a new king of Ryūkyū. In the latter case, approval and formal recognition of the new king would be formally requested of both the Shimazu clan lords of Satsuma and of the shogunate, but the request was essentially simply a matter of ritual, and none were ever denied. Extensive efforts were made to stress the foreignness of the costume, language, customs, and art of the Ryūkyū Kingdom, emphasizing the glory and power of the Shimazu clan of the Satsuma domain, the only daimyo's feudal lords in Japan to enjoy the fealty of a foreign kingdom. The missions served a similar function for the shogunate at times, helping to create the image that the shogun's power and influence extended overseas. The third Tokugawa shogun, Tokugawa Iemitsu, called for an embassy to be sent from Ryūkyū in 1634, as his predecessor Tokugawa Hidetada had done with a Korean embassy in 1617, to provide a show for the imperial court and daimyos of the shogun's power. Cultural impacts. Numerous woodblock prints and paintings of the exotic and brightly colored costumes and banners of the Ryūkyū delegation were produced and bought and sold by commoners and samurai alike. Missions chronology: 1609–1611. The kingdom of Ryūkyū was invaded by forces from the Satsuma domain in the 12th year of Kaiko 1609. King Shogi and a number of royal advisors and government officials were taken back to Kagoshima and then to Sunpu, where they met with retired shogun Tokugawa Ieyasu. The delegation continued north to Edo for a formal audience, the shogunal court of Tokugawa Hitada. Upon returning to Kagoshima, the king and officials were required to sign oaths of loyalty to Satsuma. Secondary sources, i.e. history books, often count this as the first tribute mission. 1629. No formal tribute/diplomatic mission was sent in this year, but 3 high-ranking officials from the Ryūkyū government journeyed to Edo to perform before Shogun Tokugawa Iemitsu. 1649. The 1649 mission was headed by Prince Gushikawa Choi. Choi was the 7th son of Shokaiu, son of King Shogen R. 1556–72. 1682. Prince Nago led a mission in 1682 to congratulate Shogun Tokugawa Tsuneyoshi on his succession. He alone of the members of the mission was granted an audience with the shogun. By contrast, the Korean representatives received several months later included 3 ambassadors and 7 or so aides and pages. This is but one of many differences seen in the reception of Korean and Ryukyuan embassies, reflections of the different levels of status the two countries held in the Japanese view. In presenting formal greetings on behalf of King Shote, he bowed 9 times on the 4th mat below the lower state and withdrew, and then presented obeisances on his own behalf from the veranda. This, too, reflects a lower status than the Korean ambassadors, who made only 4½ bows from the 2nd mat below the middle stage. Historian Ronald Tobey, by way of contrasting the treatment of the 2 embassies, also adds that the Ryukyuans were offered no grand banquet as the Koreans did, nor were they bade farewell by the Ryūkyū Council of Elders, chief shogunal advisors when they left Edo for home, as the Korean envoys did. 1710. Mission to Edo included 168 from Ryūkyū, far exceeding the size of any previous mission. This is a reflection in large part of the relative prosperity of the kingdom, under the guidance of royal advisor Sion. 1714. The largest mission in the history of the practice journeys to Edo, led by Princes Yanagyusuku and Kin. Tei Junsoku, Confucian scholar and influential educational reformer, accompanied the mission as the chief of correspondence. Tei met with Japanese Confucian scholars Arai Hakuseki, Aju Sorai, and Dazai Shundai. Hakuseki would later write a history of the Ryūkyū Islands, entitled History of the Southern Islands Nandaoshi, Nantoshi, based on discussions with Tei Junsoku and others during this envoy mission. Shundai likewise included passages about the Ryukyus in his economic record Jingjai Lu, Kizai Roku. Discussions between the Ryukyuan emissaries and their Japanese counterparts concerned in part problems faced by the Ryūkyū Kingdom. Economic policies put into place in the ensuing years were patterned after recent Japanese policies under Shogun Tokugawa Tsuneyoshi. The influence of this 1714 mission was particularly strong in drawing the attention of the shogunate to the affairs of the Ryūkyū Kingdom. 1748–1752. An embassy from the Ryūkyū Islands arrived in Japan in the first year of Canon 1648, and another embassy arrived in the second year of Horki 1752. 1764. The king of the Ryūkyū Islands sent an ambassador to the court of Empress Go Sakuramachi in the first year of Meiwa 1764, and presentations of Ryukyuan music were among the offerings presented by the Ryukyuan ambassador. Missions table.